Marcus Thompson had been working as a courthouse security guard for 12 years, but nothing in his experience prepared him for the chaos that erupted on that ordinary Tuesday morning. The grand courthouse in downtown Springfield buzzed with its usual activity when word spread like wildfire through the marble corridors that Judge Patricia Henley would be presiding over the most high-profile case of the year. The case involved a massive corporate fraud scandal that had rocked the entire state. Millions of dollars had vanished from pension funds, leaving thousands of retirees facing financial ruin. The defendant, Richard Blackstone, was a wealthy businessman with connections reaching into the highest circles of society. His legal team consisted of the most expensive attorneys money could buy, each one dressed in tailored suits that cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months. As Marcus checked the security arrangements for the day, he noticed something unusual. A group of men in elaborate ceremonial uniforms had gathered outside the courthouse. They wore bright red jackets with gold braiding, tall black hats with feathers, and carried ornate staffs. These weren't ordinary court officials or police officers. They looked like they belonged in a royal palace rather than an American courthouse. The leader of this peculiar group was a tall, imposing man named Colonel James Worthington III. He claimed to represent something called the Royal Order of Ancient Justice and insisted that his organization had the legal authority to conduct a special ceremonial march through the courthouse during important trials. According to Worthington, this tradition dated back centuries and was protected by obscure legal statutes that most people had forgotten about. Marcus watched with growing concern as the group prepared for their march. The courthouse was already packed with reporters, lawyers, and spectators eager to witness the Blackstone trial. Adding a bizarre ceremonial parade to the mix seemed like a recipe for disaster. The security protocols were carefully planned, and any disruption could create dangerous situations or compromise the integrity of the proceedings. When Marcus approached his supervisor, Captain Rodriguez, about the situation, he was told to let the ceremonial group proceed. Apparently, Worthington had presented some old documents to the court administration, and after a brief review, they had granted permission for the march. The decision seemed rushed and poorly thought out, but Marcus was just a security guard. His job was to follow orders, not question the wisdom of courthouse administrators. As the morning progressed, the atmosphere in the courthouse became increasingly tense. The Blackstone trial was set to begin at 10 o'clock, and the ceremonial march was scheduled for the same time. Marcus positioned himself near the main entrance, watching as reporters set up their cameras and microphones. The media attention was intense, with news crews from major networks preparing to broadcast the proceedings live. At exactly 10 minutes before 10, Colonel Worthington and his followers began their march. They entered through the main doors with great pomp and ceremony, their staffs tapping rhythmically against the marble floor. The sound echoed through the building like a drumbeat, creating an almost hypnotic effect. Spectators stopped to stare, some taking photos and videos with their phones. But as the procession moved deeper into the courthouse, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. The route they were taking would lead them directly through the area where potential jurors were being assembled for the Blackstone case. Even worse, their timing would coincide exactly with the moment when the defendant and his legal team would be entering the courtroom. Marcus quickly radioed his concerns to Captain Rodriguez, but received only a terse response telling him to maintain his post and not interfere with authorized activities. The bureaucratic response frustrated him, but he understood the chain of command. Still, something about the entire situation felt wrong. His instincts, honed by years of courthouse security work, were screaming that this ceremonial march was more than it appeared to be. As the Royal Order of Ancient Justice continued their procession, Marcus noticed that several of their members were carrying what appeared to be ancient scrolls and documents. Worthington himself held an ornate box that he claimed contained historical artifacts related to the administration of justice. The whole spectacle was becoming more theatrical by the minute, drawing attention away from the serious legal proceedings that were supposed to be the focus of the day. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Just as the most important fraud trial in years was about to begin, this mysterious group appeared with their pageantry and ceremony. Marcus began to suspect that the march might be a deliberate distraction, designed to disrupt the trial or influence potential jurors. But without concrete evidence, he couldn't act on his suspicions. As the clock approached 10 o'clock, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Despite his orders to remain at his post, he began following the ceremonial procession, staying close enough to observe their actions while trying to appear as though he was simply performing routine security duties. What he discovered in the next few minutes would expose one of the most elaborate schemes ever attempted in an American courthouse. As Marcus shadowed the ceremonial procession through the courthouse corridors, his trained eye caught details that others missed. The members of the Royal Order of Ancient Justice moved with practiced precision, but their formation wasn't random. They were positioning themselves at key points throughout the building, creating what appeared to be a deliberate obstruction of normal courthouse traffic flow. The first sign of real trouble came when the procession reached the jury assembly area. Potential jurors for the Blackstone trial had been waiting in a large room, going through the standard selection process. As the ceremonial march passed by the open doors, several of the costumed figures made elaborate gestures and spoke in loud voices about ancient traditions of justice and the sacred duty of protecting the innocent. Marcus immediately recognized what was happening. This wasn't just ceremonial theater. It was jury tampering disguised as historical pageantry. The members of the procession were deliberately trying to influence potential jurors before they could be seated for the trial. The timing, the route, and the theatrical nature of their performance all pointed to a coordinated effort to disrupt the legal proceedings, but the situation became even more suspicious when Marcus noticed one of the costumed figures dropping small pieces of paper near the jury assembly area. When he discreetly retrieved one of these papers after the procession passed, he found it contained a brief message about corporate executives being unfairly persecuted by a corrupt legal system. The paper was carefully designed to look like historical information about ancient justice traditions, but it was actually propaganda supporting the defendant. Marcus knew he had to act quickly, but he also understood that making accusations without solid proof could destroy his career and potentially cause a mistrial that would benefit the very people he suspected of orchestration this scheme. He needed more evidence, and he needed it fast. The trial was supposed to begin in less than 30 minutes. Using his security radio, Marcus contacted the courthouse's head of security, bypassing his immediate supervisor. He reported suspicious activity involving the ceremonial group and requested immediate backup to monitor their movements. While he couldn't make direct accusations yet, he could ensure that other security personnel were watching the situation closely. Meanwhile, the Royal Order of Ancient Justice continued their march toward the main courtroom, where the Blackstone trial would take place. Colonel Worthington led the group with theatrical flair, occasionally stopping to make proclamations about the sacred nature of true justice and the ancient wisdom that guides the righteous. His performance was convincing, enough that many observers seemed genuinely impressed by what they believed was a legitimate historical tradition. But Marcus noticed something that the other spectators missed. As the procession moved through the courthouse, several members of the group were using small electronic devices, possibly cell phones or communication equipment, to coordinate their actions. This level of technological coordination seemed inconsistent with their claims of following ancient traditions and suggested a much more modern and calculated operation. The breakthrough came when Marcus observed Worthington himself checking what appeared to be a detailed floor plan of the courthouse. The document wasn't some ancient scroll or historical artifact. It was a modern architectural drawing that showed security camera locations, emergency exits, and the positions of key personnel. This was intelligence gathering on a professional level, far beyond what would be needed for a simple ceremonial march. As the procession approached the main courtroom, Marcus made a decision that would put his job and possibly his safety at risk. He stepped directly into the path of the Royal Order of Ancient Justice, holding up his hand in the universal gesture for stop. The theatrical march came to an abrupt halt, with Worthington looking genuinely surprised for the first time since the morning had begun. "Sir, I need to see your authorization documents again," Marcus announced in a clear voice that carried throughout the corridor. "There's been a question raised about the scope of your permitted activities." Worthington's reaction was immediate and revealing. Instead of calmly producing the documents he had shown earlier, his face flushed with anger and his carefully maintained composure cracked. "How dare you interrupt a sacred ceremonial proceeding?" he shouted. This is an outrage against centuries of legal tradition. The volume and intensity of Worthington's response drew the attention of everyone in the area, including several reporters who had been following the procession. Camera phones appeared and news crews quickly repositioned themselves to capture what was clearly becoming a confrontation, rather than a ceremony. But Marcus had achieved his real objective. By forcing Worthington to react publicly, he had created a situation where the alleged leader of this ancient order had to either produce legitimate documentation or be exposed as a fraud. The theatrical performance that had worked so well in controlled circumstances was falling apart under direct scrutiny. "The documents are in order," Worthington insisted, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. "This harassment is completely inappropriate and possibly illegal." Marcus stood his ground, knowing that backup security personnel were now monitoring the situation. "Sir, I'm not harassing anyone. I am performing my security duties by verifying credentials for all individuals conducting special activities in this courthouse. If your documentation is legitimate, this should only take a minute." The standoff had attracted the attention of court officials, reporters, and spectators throughout the building. What had been intended as a subtle influence operation was now the center of public attention, with cameras recording every moment of the confrontation. The carefully planned scheme was unraveling in real time, and Marcus could see panic beginning to show in the eyes of several members of the ceremonial group. The confrontation between Marcus and Colonel Worthington had created a growing crowd of spectators in the courthouse corridor. News cameras captured every moment as the security guard faced down the leader of the supposed Royal Order of Ancient Justice. What neither the reporters nor most of the observers realized was that this dramatic scene was about to expose one of the most sophisticated legal fraud schemes ever attempted. Judge Patricia Henley, hearing the commotion outside her courtroom, emerged to investigate the disruption. As the presiding judge for the Blackstone trial, she was already under enormous pressure to ensure that the proceedings were conducted fairly and without interference. The last thing she needed was a circus atmosphere disrupting one of the most important cases of her career. "What exactly is happening here?" Judge Henley demanded, her voice carrying the authority that came from 20 years on the bench. "This courthouse is preparing for a major trial, and I will not tolerate disruptions to the administration of justice." Worthington immediately saw an opportunity to regain control of the situation. Straightening his elaborate uniform and adopting his most dignified posture, he addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, we are conducting a sacred ceremonial march as authorized by ancient legal statutes. This security guard is improperly interfering with our constitutionally protected activities." But Marcus had been preparing for this moment. During his years as a courthouse security guard, he had witnessed countless attempts to manipulate the legal system. His experience had taught him to recognize the difference between legitimate legal procedures and elaborate schemes designed to deceive judges and juries. More importantly, he had spent the last few minutes gathering concrete evidence of the group's deceptive activities. "Your Honor," Marcus said respectfully, "I believe this group may be attempting to interfere with the jury selection process for the Blackstone trial. I've observed them distributing materials near the jury, assembly area, and coordinating their activities using modern communication equipment inconsistent with their claims of following ancient traditions." Judge Henley's expression immediately became more serious. Any suggestion of jury tampering was a grave matter that could result in mistrial and potentially allow guilty parties to escape justice. She had seen too many cases undermined by procedural irregularities and had no intention of allowing such interference in her courtroom. "Mr. Worthington, is it?" she said, turning her attention to the leader of the ceremonial group. "I'm going to need to see your documentation immediately, and I want to examine any materials your group has been distributing in this courthouse." The request caught Worthington off guard. His earlier confidence evaporated as he realized that his carefully planned scheme was being subjected to genuine legal scrutiny. The documents he had presented to courthouse administrators earlier that morning had been accepted without thorough examination, but now he was facing an experienced federal judge who would not be easily deceived. "The documents they're historical in nature, Your Honor," Worthington stammered, very old and fragile. "Perhaps we could schedule a proper examination at a later time when appropriate preservation measures can be taken." Judge Henley's eyes narrowed. In her years on the bench, she had heard every possible excuse and delay tactic that lawyers and defendants could devise. Worthington's evasive response set off alarm bells that confirmed Marcus's suspicions about the group's legitimacy. "Mr. Worthington, if these documents are authentic historical artifacts authorizing your activities in my courthouse, then they need to be examined immediately," she said firmly. "If they're too fragile for immediate inspection, then your group's activities are suspended pending proper authentication." The crowd of spectators and reporters watched as the dramatic confrontation unfolded. What had started as a routine security check was rapidly becoming a major legal controversy, with implications far beyond the original ceremonial march. Camera phones and news cameras captured every word and gesture as the situation escalated. Marcus seized the moment to present the evidence he had gathered. "Your Honor, I also found this paper that was dropped near the jury assembly area," he said, producing the propaganda leaflet disguised as historical information. "It appears to contain messaging that could influence potential jurors in the Blackstone case." Judge Henley examined the paper carefully, her expression growing darker with each word she read. The document was clearly designed to create sympathy for corporate executives facing criminal charges, using language that portrayed such prosecutions as persecution rather than legitimate legal proceedings. Any distribution of such materials near potential jurors would constitute serious jury tampering. "This is completely unacceptable," she announced, her voice carrying throughout the corridor. "I'm ordering an immediate investigation into this group's activities and their connection to any parties involved in current legal proceedings. Bailiff, please ensure that all members of this organization remain available for questioning." Worthington made one last desperate attempt to salvage his scheme. "Your Honor, this is clearly a misunderstanding," he protested. "We are simply exercising our historical rights and constitutional freedoms. Any suggestion of improper conduct is completely unfounded." But his protests rang hollow in the face of mounting evidence. Other members of his group were beginning to show signs of panic, with some attempting to quietly distance themselves from their leader. The elaborate costumes and theatrical performance that had seemed so impressive earlier now appeared ridiculous and suspicious. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction as he watched the scheme unravel. His decision to trust his instincts and challenge the group's activities had been vindicated, but he also knew that the real investigation was just beginning. The sophisticated nature of the operation suggested connections to powerful interests with significant resources at their disposal as court security moved to detain the members of the bogus Royal Order of Ancient Justice. Marcus couldn't help but wonder about the broader implications of what they had uncovered. If someone was willing to go to such elaborate lengths to disrupt the Blackstone trial, what other schemes might be in motion? The morning's events had revealed just the tip of what was clearly a much larger conspiracy. The detention of Colonel Worthington and his followers had thrown the courthouse into chaos, but the drama was far from over. As federal agents arrived to investigate the jury tampering scheme, Marcus found himself at the center of a rapidly expanding investigation that would soon reveal connections reaching into the highest levels of corporate and political power. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen took charge of the investigation within hours of the arrests. She had built her reputation investigating white-collar crime and political corruption, and the sophisticated nature of the Royal Order scheme immediately caught her attention. This wasn't the work of amateur troublemakers. It showed the hallmarks of professional operatives with significant financial backing. "Mr. Thompson," Agent Chen said as she interviewed Marcus in a secure conference room, "your actions this morning may have prevented one of the most elaborate jury tampering operations we've ever encountered. But I need you to help us understand exactly what you observed and when." Marcus carefully recounted the morning's events, from his first suspicions about the timing of the ceremonial march to his decision to confront Worthington directly. As he spoke, Agent Chen took detailed notes and occasionally asked clarifying questions that revealed her deep understanding of courtroom security protocols and legal procedures. "You mentioned that Worthington had what appeared to be architectural drawings of the courthouse," she said. "That suggests advanced planning and inside knowledge of security arrangements. Do you have any idea how they might have obtained such detailed information?" The question troubled Marcus more than he wanted to admit. Access to courthouse floor plans and security protocols was strictly limited to authorized personnel. If the conspirators had obtained such sensitive information, It suggested they had contacts within the court system itself. Meanwhile, the interrogation of Worthington and his associates was producing shocking revelations about the scope of the conspiracy. Under pressure from federal investigators, several members of the bogus ceremonial group admitted that they were paid actors hired to participate in what they believed was an elaborate publicity stunt. They had been told that their performance was part of a promotional campaign for a historical documentary about American legal traditions. But the actors' handlers had been much more sophisticated than simple film producers. Financial records seized during raids on several locations revealed a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts designed to hide the true source of funding for the operation. The money trail led through multiple jurisdictions and involved millions of dollars in untraceable transactions. The breakthrough came when forensic accountants discovered that one of the shell companies had received a massive cash infusion just days before the Blackstone trial was scheduled to begin. The timing was too coincidental to ignore, and investigators began focusing on possible connections between the jury tampering scheme and the corporate fraud case that had been the original target. Richard Blackstone, the wealthy businessman at the center of the fraud trial, maintained his innocence and denied any knowledge of the Royal Order conspiracy. His legal team issued carefully worded statements expressing shock and dismay at the suggestion that their client might be involved in jury tampering. But federal investigators were not convinced by these denials. Agent Chen's team discovered that several of Blackstone's business associates had connections to the companies used to fund the ceremonial march scheme. While the connections were indirect and carefully obscured through multiple layers of corporate structures, the pattern suggested a coordinated effort to disrupt the trial proceedings. The investigation took an unexpected turn when computer forensics experts analyzing seized electronic devices discovered encrypted communications between Worthington and unknown parties. The messages revealed that the Royal Order scheme was actually just one part of a multi-pronged strategy to undermine the prosecution's case against Blackstone. "This is bigger than we initially thought," Agent Chen told Marcus during a follow-up interview. The ceremonial march was designed to create confusion and delay, but they also had plans to challenge the venue, question the judge's impartiality, and file numerous procedural motions designed to bog down the proceedings in legal technicalities. Marcus felt a chill as he realized how close the scheme had come to succeeding. If he hadn't trusted his instincts and challenged the group's activities, the elaborate plan might have worked exactly as intended. The Blackstone trial could have been delayed or moved to a different jurisdiction where the prosecution's carefully prepared case might be less effective, but the investigation also revealed something that surprised everyone involved. Among the seized documents and electronic files, investigators found evidence that Worthington wasn't just a paid operative. He was actually a disbarred lawyer with extensive knowledge of legal procedures and courtroom tactics. His background explained how the scheme had been so sophisticated and well-planned. James Worthington III had once been a successful defense attorney specializing in white-collar crime. His career had ended in scandal when he was caught bribing a court clerk to alter filing deadlines in a major embezzlement case. After losing his law license and serving 2 years in federal prison, he had apparently turned his legal knowledge to more creative criminal enterprises. Worthington knew exactly how to exploit the gaps in courthouse security protocols, Agent Chen explained to Marcus. He understood that most court administrators wouldn't carefully examine historical documents that appeared legitimate, especially if they were presented with sufficient authority and confidence. The revelation about Worthington's background added another layer to the conspiracy charges that federal prosecutors were preparing. His involvement transformed the case from simple jury tampering to a complex racketeering investigation with potential connections to organized crime and political corruption. As the investigation expanded, Marcus found himself dealing with media attention he had never experienced before. News outlets across the country picked up the story of the security guard who had exposed the elaborate courthouse conspiracy. Reporters wanted interviews, legal experts sought his opinion on courthouse security, and he even received inquiries from Hollywood producers interested in adapting his story for film or television. But Marcus remained focused on the ongoing investigation and his regular duties at the courthouse. He knew that his role in exposing the scheme was just the beginning of what would likely be a long and complex legal battle to bring all the conspirators to justice. 3 weeks after exposing the Royal Order conspiracy, Marcus received a phone call that would change his life forever. The caller was Dean Patricia Williams from the State University's law school, and her message was both unexpected and intriguing. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I've been following your case in the news, and I'm impressed by your understanding of legal procedures and courtroom security protocols. I'd like to discuss an opportunity that might interest you." Marcus was puzzled by the call. While he had received considerable media attention for his role in exposing the jury tampering scheme, he couldn't imagine what a law school dean might want to discuss with a courthouse security guard. The meeting took place the following afternoon in Dean Williams' office, a spacious room lined with legal texts and decorated with photographs of distinguished graduates. As Marcus entered, he was surprised to find that he wasn't the only guest. Also present was Professor Robert Martinez, who taught criminal law and procedure, and Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the university's director of adult education programs. "Mr. Thompson," Dean Williams began, "we've been analyzing your actions during the courthouse incident, and we're struck by something unusual. Your understanding of jury tampering laws, your knowledge of courtroom procedures, and your ability to recognize legal fraud patterns suggest educational background that goes beyond typical security training." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the attention and praise. "Ma'am, I just did my job. I've been working courthouse security for 12 years, so I've picked up some knowledge along the way." Professor Martinez leaned forward with interest. "That's exactly what we find remarkable," he said. "Most security personnel, even those with years of experience, wouldn't have recognized the sophisticated nature of the scheme you uncovered. Your analysis of the situation showed legal reasoning skills that typically require formal education." Dr. Harper opened a file folder and spread several documents across the conference table. "Mr. Thompson, we've done some research into your background and we discovered some interesting information. According to our records, you completed 3 years of pre-law studies at Central State University before leaving school. Is that correct?" Marcus nodded reluctantly. It was a part of his past he rarely discussed. "Yes, ma'am. I had to leave school when my father became ill. I needed to work to help support my family, and I never got the chance to go back." The 3 educators exchanged meaningful glances. Dean Williams smiled warmly as she continued the conversation. "Mr. Thompson, we believe you have untapped potential that could benefit both yourself and the legal profession. We'd like to offer you a unique opportunity to complete your education through our adult learning program." The offer was more generous than Marcus could have imagined. The law school was proposing a combination work-study arrangement that would allow him to complete his undergraduate degree while beginning law school courses. His experience in courthouse security would be valuable in specialized courses dealing with legal system, administration, and courtroom procedures. We're particularly interested in your insights about courthouse security vulnerabilities," Professor Martinez explained. "The Royal Order incident exposed serious gaps in our legal system's defenses against sophisticated manipulation. Your practical experience combined with formal legal education could help develop better protective protocols." Marcus was overwhelmed by the offer. At 42 years old, he had long ago given up dreams of becoming a lawyer. The financial realities of supporting his family and the demands of his security job had made completing his education seem impossible. But this opportunity was different. It was designed specifically around his circumstances and experience. The timing was perfect in ways that Marcus was only beginning to understand. The publicity surrounding his role in exposing the conspiracy had brought him to the attention of legal professionals throughout the state. Several law firms had already inquired about hiring him as a consultant on courthouse security matters, and the FBI had asked him to assist with training programs for federal agents. But there was another factor that made the law school offer especially appealing. During the investigation into the Royal Order conspiracy, Marcus had discovered that he genuinely enjoyed analyzing legal problems and developing solutions to complex procedural challenges. His natural investigative instincts combined with his practical courtroom experience seemed well suited to legal work. Dean Williams provided additional details about the proposed program. You would maintain your current employment while taking evening and weekend classes. The university would provide financial assistance to cover tuition costs, and we would work with your employer to arrange scheduling that accommodates both your job, responsibilities, and your academic requirements. The conversation continued for over an hour as Marcus asked questions about the program requirements, career prospects, and the time commitment involved. The educators were clearly excited about the possibility of having such an experienced practitioner in their program, and they had obviously given considerable thought to making the arrangement work. As the meeting concluded, Marcus realized that he was facing one of the most important decisions of his life. The safe, predictable routine of courthouse security had served him well for 12 years, but the Royal Order incident had awakened ambitions he thought he had buried long ago. "I need some time to think about this and discuss it with my family," Marcus told the group. "This is a generous offer, but it would be a major change for all of us." Dean Williams handed him a comprehensive information packet. "Of course," she said. "Take all the time you need. But I want you to know that we believe you have the potential to make significant contributions to the legal profession. Your combination of practical experience and natural analytical ability is quite rare." Driving home that evening, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken since that Tuesday morning, when he decided to challenge the Royal Order of Ancient Justice. What had started as a routine security matter had evolved into a major federal investigation, national media attention, and now a life-changing educational opportunity. But he also knew that accepting the law school offer would mean taking risks and making sacrifices that would affect not just himself, but his entire family. The security guard's salary that had supported them for over a decade would need to be supplemented by student loans and part-time income. The time he currently spent with his wife and teenage children would be reduced by evening classes and weekend study sessions. Still, as Marcus considered the possibilities that lay ahead, he felt an excitement he hadn't experienced in years. The Royal Order incident had shown him that he was capable of much more than he had ever imagined, and the law school offer represented a chance to build on those newly discovered abilities. 5 years after that fateful Tuesday morning when he challenged the Royal Order of Ancient Justice, Marcus Thompson stood before the State Bar Association as a newly licensed attorney, ready to be sworn in alongside 43 other graduates from the evening law program. The journey had been longer and more challenging than anyone had anticipated, but the results exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. The Blackstone case, which had started it all, had concluded with multiple convictions and prison sentences totaling over 60 years. Richard Blackstone himself received 15 years in federal prison for his role in the pension fund fraud, while Colonel James Worthington III was sentenced to 8 years for conspiracy, jury tampering, and racketeering. The investigation had ultimately uncovered a network of corruption that reached into several state governments and resulted in reforms to courthouse security protocols. Nationwide, Marcus had played a crucial role in the prosecution's success, serving as a consultant on courtroom security matters and helping investigators understand how the Royal Order scheme had been designed to exploit weaknesses in the legal system. His testimony during the trials had been compelling and precise, demonstrating the analytical skills that had first caught the attention of the law school faculty. The academic journey had been grueling, but rewarding. Balancing full-time work, family responsibilities, and law school courses had required sacrifices from everyone in Marcus's household. His wife Sarah had taken on additional responsibilities at home and with their children, while Marcus's teenage son and daughter had learned to help with household tasks and younger siblings. Financial pressures had been constant throughout the 5-year program. Even with the university's generous scholarship assistance and consulting income from his security expertise, the family had struggled to make ends meet. There were months when Marcus questioned whether the sacrifice was worth the potential rewards, especially during his second year when he was working 60-hour weeks while carrying a full course load. But the law school faculty had been supportive throughout his journey, recognizing that his practical experience brought a unique perspective to classroom discussions. Professor Martinez, who had become Marcus's mentor, often used examples from the Royal Order case to illustrate complex legal concepts for other students. Marcus's insights about courthouse operations and security vulnerabilities had contributed to several published research papers on legal system reform. The bar exam had been the final hurdle, and Marcus had approached it with the same methodical preparation, that had served him well as a security guard. He studied with the intensity of someone who understood that this opportunity might never come again. Reviewing cases and legal principles with the same attention to detail he had once applied to monitoring courthouse activities. When the bar exam results were posted, Marcus was among the 87% of candidates who passed on their first attempt. The moment he saw his name on the list was one of the most satisfying of his life, representing not just personal achievement but validation of all the sacrifices his family had made to support his dream. The swearing-in ceremony was attended by an impressive group of supporters. Judge Patricia Henley, who had presided over the Blackstone trial, was there to witness Marcus take the oath. FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, who had led the investigation into the Royal Order conspiracy, had flown in from Washington to attend. Dean Williams and Professor Martinez were beaming with pride as their unconventional student achieved his goal, but the most meaningful presence was that of Marcus's family. Sarah sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband culminate years of hard work and determination. Their children, now college age, were equally emotional as they witnessed their father's transformation from courthouse security guard to licensed attorney. The career possibilities that lay ahead were exciting and varied. Several law firms had already expressed interest in hiring Marcus, particularly those specializing in white-collar criminal defense and government contracting. His unique background in courthouse security and his role in exposing the Royal Order conspiracy made him an attractive candidate for firms dealing with complex litigation and security-related legal issues, but Marcus had already made a decision about his immediate future. The State Attorney General's office had offered him a position in their white-collar crime division, where his investigative experience and understanding of courtroom procedures would be valuable assets. The job would allow him to continue fighting the kind of sophisticated fraud schemes he had first encountered with the Royal Order case. At the position also came with a request to help develop new training programs for courthouse security personnel and law enforcement officers. The Royal Order incident had revealed vulnerabilities that existed in courthouses throughout the country, and Marcus's insights could help prevent similar schemes from succeeding in the future. During his acceptance speech at the Bar Association ceremony, Marcus reflected on the unexpected path that had led him to this moment. 5 years ago, I was a courthouse security guard who trusted his instincts when something didn't seem right, he said. That decision changed not just my own life, but helped expose a conspiracy that could have undermined our entire legal system. He paused to look at his family and mentors in the audience. This achievement belongs not just to me, but to everyone who believed in the possibility of second chances and supported me through this journey. It proves that it's never too late to pursue your dreams, and that sometimes the most important qualifications for success are curiosity, determination, and the willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult. As the ceremony concluded and the new attorneys mingled with family members and colleagues, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation. The boy who had dreamed of becoming a lawyer, the young man who had left school to support his family, and the security guard who had trusted his instincts had all contributed to this moment. The future was full of possibilities, but Marcus knew that his most important qualification would always be the same characteristic that had served him well as a courthouse security guard: the ability to recognize when something wasn't right and the courage to act on that knowledge. Whether he was investigating complex financial crimes or developing security protocols, those fundamental qualities would guide his work as an attorney just as they had shaped his success as a security guard. The courtroom twist that had begun with a suspicious ceremonial march had ultimately revealed not just a criminal conspiracy, but the hidden potential within an ordinary man who refused to ignore his instincts. 3 months into his new position at the Attorney General's office, Marcus received a case that brought his career full circle. A group calling themselves the Heritage Foundation for Constitutional Rights had been conducting what they claimed were educational seminars at courthouses across 3 states. The seminars were supposedly designed to teach citizens about their legal rights, but several judges had reported suspicious activities around high-profile cases. As Marcus reviewed the case files, familiar patterns began to emerge. The timing of the seminars coincided with important trials. The educational materials contained subtle messaging that could influence potential jurors, and the organization's funding sources were obscured through complex financial arrangements. It was the Royal Order scheme all over again, but with different costumes and more sophisticated methods. "Some people never learn," Marcus said to his supervisor, as he outlined his analysis of the Heritage Foundation case. "But fortunately, some of us do." The investigation that followed would become Marcus's first major success as a prosecutor, drawing on everything he had learned during his transition from security guard to attorney. His unique perspective, combining practical courtroom experience with legal expertise, proved invaluable in unraveling another elaborate scheme designed to manipulate the justice system. But perhaps more importantly, the case reinforced Marcus's belief that his unconventional path to the legal profession had been exactly right. His years as a courthouse security guard hadn't been a detour from his legal career. They had been essential preparation for it. The combination of street-level observation skills and formal legal training created a prosecutor uniquely equipped to recognize and combat sophisticated attacks on the judicial system. As Marcus prepared for the Heritage Foundation trial, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that morning when he decided to challenge Colonel Worthington and his theatrical followers. The security guard's instincts that had initially seemed like a liability in the academic world had become his greatest asset as a practicing attorney. The young law students he now mentored often asked him for advice about building successful careers. His answer was always the same: pay attention to the details that others miss. Trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right, and never underestimate the value of real-world experience in understanding how legal systems actually work. The courthouse where Marcus had spent 12 years as a security guard now displayed a plaque commemorating his role in exposing the Royal Order, conspiracy, and reforming courthouse security protocols. But for Marcus, the real monument to that fateful morning